Hello, my little friends. Today I will tell you one of the most magical and timeless fairy tales ever written, the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This is a tale that has traveled across centuries, whispered by grandmothers at bedtime, acted out in puppet theaters, painted in old picture books, and even sung in famous films. But today, I will tell it to you in my own warm words, so that you may feel as though you are sitting by a fireplace, listening to a story unfold like a dream. The Queen's Wish. Long, long ago, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a gentle and beautiful queen. One winter's day she sat by her window, sewing. The window frame was carved from black ebony wood, and outside, snowflakes drifted down softly, covering the land in a sparkling white blanket. As she sewed, she pricked her finger with the needle. 3 drops of red blood fell upon the white snow on the windowsill. The queen gazed at the contrast and whispered to herself, "Oh, if only I could have a child, as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as this ebony wood." And so, as if her wish had flown to the heavens, the queen gave birth to a baby girl. The child had skin as white as snow, lips as red as roses, and hair as black as ebony wood. They named her Snow White. But joy was soon mixed with sorrow, for the kind queen did not live long after the birth. The king, heartbroken, remarried in time, but his new wife was very different. The new queen was dazzlingly beautiful, but her heart was as cold as ice and filled with pride. She cared for no one else, only her own beauty, and in her chambers, she kept a magic mirror. Every day she would stand before it and ask in her commanding voice, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror, bound by enchantment, would always reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." This answer pleased the queen greatly. She could not bear the thought of anyone being more beautiful than she. Meanwhile, Snow White was growing up. She was kind, gentle, and full of laughter. Animals followed her. Flowers seemed to bloom brighter in her presence, and the people of the kingdom loved her dearly. Day by day, her beauty blossomed, and soon she became more radiant than even the queen herself. The mirror speaks the truth. One morning, as the queen stood before her mirror, she asked her familiar question, but this time, the mirror's answer was different. "My queen, you are fair, it is true, but Snow White is fairer than you." The queen's heart twisted with jealousy. Rage burned in her chest. How dare the mirror speak such words? But the mirror never lied. From that moment, the queen hated Snow White. She could not bear to see her face or hear her laughter. Jealousy grew like a thorn bush inside her heart. The huntsman. At last, the queen's envy turned into a dark plan. She summoned a huntsman, a strong man loyal to her court. Looking at him with her cold eyes, she said, "Take Snow White into the forest, far, far away. Kill her, and bring me her heart as proof." The huntsman bowed, though sorrow tugged at his conscience. Snow White followed him into the woods, innocent and trusting. But when the time came, the huntsman could not do it. He looked into her eyes, so pure and kind, and his hands trembled. "Run, child," he whispered. "Run into the forest and never return to the castle. The queen wants you dead. I cannot harm you, but you must flee now." Snow White's heart pounded with fear, but she obeyed. She ran deep into the forest, her footsteps crunching on the leaves, her tears streaming down her cheeks. The huntsman, to deceive the queen, killed a wild boar and brought back its heart instead. The queen, believing it to be Snow White's, felt triumphant for the moment. The forest. Snow White wandered deeper into the forest. The trees loomed tall, their branches like arms reaching for her. Strange eyes glowed in the shadows. Every sound, the hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves, made her jump. But after hours of wandering, the forest softened. Birds chirped sweetly, deer, rabbits, and squirrels peeked from behind the trees. They sensed Snow White's gentle soul and gathered around her as if to comfort her. As night approached, she stumbled upon a small cottage. Its windows glowed with warm light, and smoke rose from its chimney. Curious and exhausted, Snow White knocked softly on the door. When no one answered, she pushed it open and stepped inside. The cottage of the seven. The cottage was tiny yet tidy. On the table were 7 little plates, 7 little cups, and 7 little spoons. By the wall were 7 small beds, neatly lined up, each with a blanket folded at the foot. Snow White was hungry and thirsty, so she nibbled a little bread and sipped a little milk from each cup. Then, weary from her journey, she tried each bed until she found one that was just right. Curling up, she fell fast asleep. That night, the owners of the cottage returned. They were none other than 7 dwarfs, who worked all day in the mountains, mining for gold and precious gems. When they entered their home, they immediately noticed something was different. "Who has been sitting in my chair?" asked the first. "Who has been eating from my plate?" asked the second. "Who has been drinking from my cup?" asked the third. And so on, until they reached the 7th dwarf, who said, "Someone is sleeping in my bed, and look, she is still here." The dwarfs gathered around, marveling at the sight of Snow White. She stirred and slowly opened her eyes. At first she was frightened, but their kind faces calmed her. She told them her story about the jealous queen, the huntsman, and her escape into the forest. The dwarfs listened carefully. "Stay with us," they said. "We will protect you. You can keep our house, cook our meals, and in return you will have a safe home." Snow White gratefully agreed. For the first time in many days, she felt safe. The queen's fury. Meanwhile, back at the castle, the queen once again stood before her mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And once again, the mirror replied, "My queen, you are fair. It is true. But Snow White, beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs, is still fairer than you." The queen's face turned pale with rage. The huntsman had deceived her. Snow White was alive. Her heart burned hotter than ever, and she vowed, "Then I must destroy her myself." Snow White now lived happily in the cozy cottage of the 7 dwarfs. Every morning, the dwarfs marched off to the mountains, singing cheerfully as they went to dig for precious stones. And every evening, they returned home to find Snow White waiting for them, the house tidy, the table set, and warm food ready to be shared. The dwarfs loved her dearly, not only for her kindness and care but also for her gentle spirit. She sang as she worked, her voice as sweet as a bird's song. She played with the forest animals, who often came to visit the cottage. The little home was filled with joy, laughter, and friendship. But far away in the castle, the evil queen had not forgotten her envy. The queen's anger grows. Once again, the queen stood before her magic mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" She expected to hear her own name, but the mirror gave the same answer as before. "My queen, you are fair. It is true. But Snow White, beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs, is still fairer than you." The queen's hands clenched into fists. She could not bear it any longer. She realized that if she wanted Snow White gone, she would have to do it with her own cleverness and cruelty. "Then I must disguise myself," she hissed, "and I will trick her into trusting me. This time, she will not escape." The first disguise, the tight laces. The queen dressed herself as a peddler woman. She put on a ragged cloak, covered her face with a hood, and filled a basket with colorful laces and ribbons. With this disguise, she traveled deep into the forest until she reached the dwarf's cottage. Snow White was alone, busy sweeping the floor, when the old woman knocked at the door. "Good day, dearie," croaked the queen in her false voice. "Would you like some beautiful laces for your dress? See how bright and lovely they are." Snow White, who had never learned to distrust strangers, opened the door. She admired the laces, their shining colors twisting like rainbows. "Oh, yes, they are so pretty," she said with delight. "Let me lace your bodice tighter, so it will fit you more beautifully," said the disguised queen. Snow White stood still as the woman pulled the laces around her waist, but the queen pulled them tighter and tighter, until poor Snow White could not breathe. She gasped, her face turned pale, and she collapsed to the floor. The queen laughed wickedly. "Now I am truly the fairest of them all," she whispered, and she hurried back to the castle. The dwarfs saved Snow White. That evening, the dwarfs returned. To their horror, they found Snow White lying on the ground, still and pale, but as they examined her, they noticed the laces tied cruelly tight. Quickly, they cut them open, and Snow White took a deep breath. Her color returned, and she opened her eyes. The dwarfs shook their heads gravely. "You must be careful, Snow White," they said. "Do not open the door to strangers while we are away. The queen is still dangerous." Snow White promised to obey, but the queen was not finished. The second disguise, the poisoned comb. Back at the castle, the queen rushed to her mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" But once again, the mirror answered, "My queen, you are fair. It is true. But Snow White, beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs, is still fairer than you." The queen stamped her feet in fury. "That girl still lives. Very well. I shall try again." This time she disguised herself as another peddler woman, carrying fine goods in her basket. She filled it with shining trinkets, including a beautiful comb, but this comb was coated with a deadly poison. Once again, she walked to the dwarf's cottage and knocked on the door. Snow White peeked out through the window. "Go away," she said. "I am not allowed to let anyone in, but surely you would like a gift, child." The old woman crooned. "See this comb, so fine and lovely. It will make your hair shine like the sun." Snow White, unable to resist her curiosity, opened the door just a crack. The woman held out the comb. "Let me fix it in your hair, dearie," she urged. Snow White allowed her to do so, but the moment the comb touched her hair, the poison seeped into her skin. Her eyes fluttered, and she fell down, unconscious. The queen smiled cruelly. That should be the end of her. The dwarfs saved her again. When the dwarfs came home that evening, they found Snow White lying motionless once again. They feared the worst, but soon noticed the comb stuck in her hair. Pulling it out, they watched as Snow White stirred and awoke. "It was the queen again," they said gravely. "She will never rest until you are gone. You must never open the door to anyone." Snow White nodded solemnly, trembling at the memory. But the queen was still not finished. The third disguise, the poisoned apple. At the castle, the queen hurried to her mirror once more. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" But again, the mirror replied, "My queen, you are fair. It is true. But Snow White, beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs, is still fairer than you." The queen's scream of rage echoed through the castle halls. "If laces and combs cannot defeat her," she hissed, "then I will use the simplest trick of all. An apple, one bite will seal her fate." She went to her secret chamber and brewed a powerful poison. She dipped a fresh apple into the brew. When it was done, the apple looked beautiful, red and shiny, tempting to the eye, but half of it held the deadly poison, while the other half remained harmless. This way, the queen could take a bite herself to prove it was safe. Disguising herself once more, this time as a kind farmer's wife, she traveled deep into the forest. The temptation of the apple. Snow White, remembering the dwarf's warning, did not open the door when the old woman knocked. "Good day, dear child," said the queen in a sweet voice. "I am just a poor woman with apples to sell. Would you like one? They are sweet and delicious." "No, thank you," Snow White said firmly. "I cannot let anyone in." "Oh, don't be silly," laughed the old woman. "Surely you can take one. Look, I will cut it in half. You take the red side, and I will eat the white side." She cut the apple and took a bite from the harmless half. Snow White, seeing this, believed it was safe. She took the red half, smiled politely, and bit into it. The moment the juice touched her lips, her knees buckled, the apple fell from her hand, and she collapsed to the ground. This time, no lace could be loosened, no comb could be removed. The poison ran through her body, deep and deadly. The queen's eyes glittered with triumph. She cackled. "Now, at last, I am the fairest of them all." She hurried back to the castle, certain her victory was complete. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Part 3. When the seven dwarfs returned from the mountains that evening, they were in high spirits, singing their cheerful song as they marched home. But the moment they stepped into their cottage, their hearts sank. Snow White lay on the floor, pale and still, the red apple beside her hand. They rushed to her side, calling her name, shaking her gently, but there was no breath, no heartbeat, no movement. "She is gone," whispered one of the dwarfs, his voice trembling. Tears filled their eyes. Their dear friend, the one who had brought light and joy to their lives, had been taken from them by the queen's cruel trick. The dwarfs mourning. For 3 days and 3 nights, the dwarfs sat by Snow White's side. They could not bring themselves to bury her. She looked as though she were only sleeping. Her cheeks were still rosy, her lips still red, and her skin still as white as snow. "She is too beautiful to be laid in the cold earth," said one of the dwarfs. So they built a special coffin made of shining glass, so clear that they could see her face. They placed her inside gently, covering her with flowers. On the lid, they wrote her name in golden letters, Snow White, beloved and pure. Then they carried the glass coffin into a glade in the forest. There, among the birds and blossoms, they kept watch over her. Day after day, the dwarfs tended to her resting place. Forest animals gathered there as well, grieving with them. Rabbits, deer, and birds would come and sit silently, as if they too mourned the gentle girl who had once been their friend. The queen's triumph. Far away in the castle, the wicked queen once again approached her mirror. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" At last, the mirror replied, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." The queen smiled with cruel satisfaction. Snow White was gone. No one in the world could rival her beauty now, or so she believed. Time passes, days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, yet Snow White did not change. Though lifeless, she remained as lovely as ever, her beauty untouched by time. She lay in her glass coffin, like a statue of pure innocence. The dwarfs never abandoned her. Each day they came to sit by her side, polishing the glass so it shone, bringing fresh flowers, and singing soft songs of sorrow and remembrance. They guarded her as if she were still alive. And so, The story of the sleeping maiden in the forest spread far and wide. Travelers whispered of the girl who was fairer than the dawn, who rested in eternal slumber watched over by 7 loyal dwarfs. The prince. One day, a young prince from a neighboring kingdom was riding through the forest. He had heard tales of a maiden so beautiful that even in death, she outshone the living. His heart was filled with curiosity and reverence. At last, he came upon the glade where the glass coffin stood. There, among the flowers and trees, he saw her, Snow White. The prince was struck with awe. Her beauty was unlike anything he had ever seen. He felt sorrow rise in his heart that such a radiant being should be lost to the world. He turned to the dwarfs and said softly, "Please, let me take her with me. I will build her a place of honor in my palace, where she will be remembered forever. I cannot bear to leave her here in the forest." At first, the dwarfs refused. They loved Snow White too dearly to part with her. But the prince's voice was gentle, and his eyes sincere. He promised to cherish her memory, to guard her as they had. Finally, with heavy hearts, the dwarfs agreed. The awakening. The prince's servants lifted the coffin to carry it away, but as they moved, one of them stumbled. The jolt caused the piece of poisoned apple that had lodged in Snow White's throat to shift. Suddenly, she coughed. Her chest rose with breath. Her eyes fluttered open. The dwarfs gasped in wonder. The servants froze in shock. And the prince, his heart leaping with joy, rushed to her side. Snow White blinked, confused. "Where am I?" she whispered. The prince knelt beside her. "You are safe," he said softly. "You were in a deep sleep, but now you are awake." The dwarfs wept with happiness, their tears shining like jewels. They danced around, laughing and crying at once. Their beloved Snow White had returned to them. Love's promise. Snow White sat up, her cheeks rosy once more, her lips as red as before. She told them of the last thing she remembered, the old woman with the apple. The dwarfs explained all that had happened since, how they had guarded her, how the prince had come. The prince looked into her eyes and said, "From the moment I saw you, I knew you were meant to be part of my life. Will you come with me to my father's castle? Will you be my queen?" Snow White, shy but smiling, nodded. She felt a warmth in her heart unlike any she had ever known. The wedding. Word spread quickly of Snow White's miraculous awakening. Soon, the king's castle was filled with joy and celebration. The prince and Snow White were married in a grand ceremony. The dwarfs were honored guests, seated at places of respect, their eyes shining with pride. The halls were filled with music, laughter, and dancing. Snow White wore a gown that glimmered like moonlight, and the prince never left her side. Together, they radiated happiness. The queen's fate, but not all hearts rejoiced. Back in her castle, the wicked queen once again asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the mirror answered, "My queen, you are fair, it is true. But the young queen, Snow White, is far fairer than you." The queen shrieked in horror. Her face twisted with fury. Snow White lived and was now a queen herself. Unable to resist her curiosity, the queen disguised herself once more and traveled to the celebration. But when she arrived, she saw Snow White shining with happiness, admired by all. The queen's jealousy consumed her, and yet her wickedness had reached its end. The people saw through her disguise, and she was driven away, never to trouble Snow White again. Happily ever after, Snow White and her prince lived together in love and joy. She ruled with kindness, her heart as pure as the day she was born. The dwarfs often visited the castle, and they were welcomed with open arms. The land prospered under Snow White's gentle care. She never forgot her days in the forest, her animal friends, or the dwarfs who had saved her life. And so, the story of Snow White became a legend, told from one generation to the next, a tale of beauty, kindness, friendship, and the triumph of love over envy. Goodbye with kind wishes, my little friends. Please like and subscribe to my channel.